So another good time, June 22nd, was in 1978. I don't know if you remember this. Aliyah Almaty, but James W. Christie and Robert S. Harrington discovered the only known moon of Pluto, Charon. So Charon is found, C-H-A-R-O-N, Charon. So, but Pluto is no longer a planet. So it's a moon of an asteroid. I mean, it's kind of lame, right? But that's kind of cool. Asteroid has a moon, right? It's kind of like a little buddy, a little moon. Asteroid's got some gravitational pull, right? So Neil deGrasse Tyson had downgraded the status of Pluto from planet to dwarf planet. He did it by himself. It's not true. There's a big council of scientists that did this. But some people say that Pluto's a dwarf planet. Other people say it's an asteroid. So that adds some shadows of doubt to what is Charon's role in our solar system. So previously, the unknown moon orbiting Pluto at a distance of 12,000 miles or 19,000 kilometers, which makes more sense. Why are we not on the metric system? All right. So with a period of 6.4 days, the moon was named Charon after the boatman in Greek mythology who took the souls of the dead across the river Styx to Pluto's underworld. That's who Charon is, the boatman in the Greek mythology who took the souls of the dead across the river Styx to Pluto's underworld. That sounds like hell. Charon is the person who takes people to hell. I mean, I guess maybe that's because Pluto is at the end of the solar system and the moon would actually be farther out, so it's the gatekeeper to hell. But what we have found out is instead of being the only planet in its region, like the rest of the solar system, Pluto and its moons are now known to be just a large example of a collection of objects called the Kuiper Belt, K-U-I-P-E-R belt, the Kuiper Belt. And astronomers have been turning up larger and larger objects in the Kuiper Belt. In 2009, Mike Brown and his team dropped the bombshell. They had discovered an object that was further out than the orbit of Pluto that was either the same size as Pluto or even larger. It was officially named the 2003 UB313. The object was later designated as Eris, E-R-I-S. Since its discovery, astronomers have determined that Eris's size is approximately 1,600 miles across, which is 25% more mass than Pluto. So it's 2,600 kilometers across, but there's more mass in Eris than there is Pluto. So that means Eris is larger. It's made of the same ice/rock mixture. It's more massive than Pluto. So how can we have just 9 planets, right? If Pluto is the last planet, then what do you call Eris? Who's bigger? Is that the 10th planet? So the 9 planets in the solar system is beginning to fall apart. You have to figure out what Eris is. Is Eris a planet, or is it part of the Kuiper Belt? And if it's part of the Kuiper Belt, then the Pluto, is it also part of the Kuiper Belt, or is it just one big asteroid or a dwarf planet? And there is still disagreement about it. In the end, astronomers voted for the controversial decision of demoting Pluto and Eris down to the newly created classification of dwarf planet. So in a way, Pluto's still a planet, right? It's just a dwarf planet. And Eris is a dwarf planet too. So we got 10 fucking planets. I think we should be excited about this, you know. Pluto is still a planet, and now Eris is a planet. And look at the discussion that we're having. I think this is exciting. This is very important to know. So June 22nd, fucking understand your solar system. Okay, you don't have to understand the galaxy or the universe, but the solar system, I think that would be important. So astronomers decided that they would make a final decision about the definition of a planet at the XXVI, General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union. It was held from August 14th to the 25th in 2006 in Prague, Czech Republic. That's Bohemia. That's where my ancestors from, the Damascos, from the Czech Republic. So in the end, astronomers voted for the controversial decision of voting it to a dwarf planet. So I think this is good stuff. The number XXV1, that's 26, the 26th General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union. So it sounds important. All right. So in order to understand if Pluto was a planet, you had to meet 3 requirements that was ordained by the International Astronomical Union, the IAU for short. So it needs to be in orbit around the sun. So yeah, Pluto goes around the sun. It needs to have enough gravity to pull itself into a spherical shape. There we go again. Pluto is a sphere. But it needs to have cleared the neighborhood of its orbit. So this is where Pluto isn't a planet. Clear the neighborhood. So as planets form, they become the dominant gravitational body in their orbit in the solar system. As they interact with each other, smaller objects, they either consume them or sling them away with their gravity. But Pluto is part of the Kuiper belt. It's got this moon that's tagging along with it, right? Charon. So essentially, Pluto's mostly a planet, but they're putting it in the Kuiper belt. So it's a dwarf planet. It's not a full planet. So that's, there you go, America. Now you understand why Pluto is not a planet anymore. It wasn't Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was the International Astronomical Union. So Henry Hudson, he's an oppressor. I like to think that he's an oppressor, okay? So it could be that the people that's underneath him were criminal, right? And they took out a good man. But my guess is he's an oppressor. So June 22nd, 1611. 1611. This is before the Greenwich Observatory was commissioned. So English explorer Henry Hudson, his teenage son John, and 7 crewmen were set adrift in a small shallop in present-day Hudson Bay by mutineers on the ship Discovery, and they were never heard from again. So Hudson Bay is named after Henry Hudson, right? Hudson Bay, Hudson River, the Hudson Strait, all of them bear Henry Hudson's namesake. The mutineers provided the castaways with clothing, powder, and shot, some pikes, an iron pot, some meal, and other miscellaneous items. When the mutineers returned to England, they were tried for murder, but they were acquitted. Henry Hudson and his marooned crewmates appear as mythic characters in the famous story Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. So when they're talking about who is Rip Van Winkle, right? He sleeps for 100 years and then wakes up and everything's changed. They're saying that they appear as mythic creatures or mythic characters. So, yeah, I'm not for sure who they are. At first I was thinking Henry Hudson was Rip Van Winkle, but perhaps not. So, Henry Hudson, right? Damn. Don't be a dick. Don't be an oppressor. You might get mutinied. And then nobody ever hears from him. Hudson Bay, Hudson River, Hudson Strait, and he gets mutinied along with his teenage son John and 7 crewmen. He could have survived. Maybe he's in, a Native American tribe. Maybe they, all watched out for Mr. Henry Hudson, and I don't know. Probably not. So, yeah. Henry Hudson got mutinied, 1611, June 22nd. In 1638 or 1633, I've seen both of these dates. I bet I could just look it up. But this is going to be before the Greenwich Observatory was commissioned and after Henry Hudson gets mutinied. A mutiny happened. Isn't that revolutionary, a mutiny? So, June 22nd, Galileo is found guilty. He was forced by the Inquisition to abjure, curse, and detest his Copernican heliocentric views. He thought that the sun was in the middle of the solar system and the planets all revolved around the sun. Like a moron, right? The Catholic Church knew that the earth was the center and the sun revolved around the earth. Because that, is insane. So he's found guilty of heresy by the Catholic Church for his Copernican views. He's sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his 10 years of life left. That's what happens to Galileo. Sorry Galileo, you think that the planets revolve around the sun? You're in house arrest. And that was actually, nice, right? They could have executed him. Now, what was the original crime? He found that there's moons that are revolving around Jupiter. And if Jupiter has moons, well then shit. That means the Earth isn't the center of the universe, because for Jupiter's moons, Jupiter is the center of their universe. So it kind of threw the whole, Earth as the center of the universe Catholic opinion out the window. Now, if the planets had moons revolving around them, then clearly the heavenly bodies don't all revolve around Earth. So the Pope in the Holy Office of the Catholic Church in Rome forces Galileo Galilei to recant his view that the sun and not the Earth is the center of the universe in the form he presented in after heated controversy. No. Okay, I'll say it if you don't kill me. Eventually, 350 years later, on October 31st, on Halloween in 1992, the Catholic Church admits that it was wrong. We were wrong, 350 years later. 350, that's how long it takes for the Catholic Church to correct one of the biggest fucking glaring mistakes. You can't get more obvious of a mistake than that. A scientific revolution you can't fuck with, okay? Because even if you tried to, you killed all the scientists who said that Earth revolves around the sun, even if everybody during that time of Galileo Galilei believed the Catholic Church's lies and bullshit, that didn't actually change the reality. The reality was the sun was the center of the solar system, not the Earth. But the Catholic Church, right, God made man, so therefore we're the center of God's world. That's, they're getting into fucking science and they're fucking up. They actually had this, something, Liberatorium, they banned books. They had a banned books list, and it was a bunch of scientists. And this Galileo, they actually killed, I want to say Bruno, a guy named Bruno, but they've killed other people before, the Catholic Church, over science. So Galileo was, famous. And so he says, I, Galileo, do swear that I have always believed, do now believe, and with God's aid shall believe hereafter. All that which is taught and preached by the Catholic Church, I must wholly forsake the false opinion that the sun is the center of the world and moves not, and that the earth is not the center of the world and moves. He was then condemned to the formal prison of the Holy Office for an undetermined amount of time, which would be served at the pleasure of his judges, and required to repeat the 7 penitential psalms once a week for 3 years. The next day, the Pope specified the prison sentence should be house arrest. House arrest. So he's found guilty. June 22nd, I think 1633 would be my guess. 1633, June 22nd, Galileo is found guilty. It's it's not a holiday, but it does show you it takes the Catholic Church 350 fucking years to correct one of the most obvious glaring mistakes ever. So I'm sure they won't figure out homosexuality is okay until, the year 5000? June 22nd, 1973, Skylab astronauts splashed down safely in the Pacific after a record 28 days in space. I guess that was, something in 1973. They were in space for a month, and then eventually they splashed down safely in the Pacific. Safely, right? They were safe. So Skylab astronauts. Not Skynet, but Skylab. 1989, June 22nd, the government of Angola and the anti-communist rebels of UNITA, UNITA movement agreed to a formal truce in their 14-year-old civil war. Angola versus the anti-communist rebels. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. I would like to take a greater look in this, and also the June uprising in Lithuania. So the June uprising in Lithuania, June 22nd to the 29th in 1941. This is in a direct, reaction to Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Russia by Hitler. So again, 1941, June 22nd. It helped with the Croatia, right? Croatia, and then Belarus. So Belarus celebrates their fighting back. Croatia celebrates their fighting back against Hitler's declaration of war against Russia, Operation Barbarossa. And then in Lithuania, there was the June uprising for the same fucking operation. So that's at least 3 countries that have holidays today in defense of their own homeland and of fighting against the fucking invading Nazi fascists. During World War II, 1945, June 22nd, the Battle for Okinawa officially ended after 81 days, or 12 weeks. 1945, June 22nd, the World War II Battle for Okinawa ended. 12,520 Americans and 110,000 Japanese were killed in the 83-day campaign. 83, 81 days, 12 weeks, 3 months. So Okinawa was one of the bloodiest battles. I don't know too much about it, but, you know, here are the numbers. 110,000 Japanese, shit ton of Japanese, way more Japanese died than Americans. Almost 100,000 more Japanese died. But the Americans lost 12,520 in the entirety of the Vietnam War. There were 75,000 Americans that were killed. So 12,000 were killed in just 3 months with World War II. Which is a large percentage of the 75,000, you know, that was killed in Vietnam. June 22nd, 1956, this is a decolonization war against France. The battle for Algiers began as 3 buildings in Casbah was blown up. So now we got the Battle of Algiers. This is in the middle of the Algerian War. Decolonizing, they were fighting against the French oppressors. Algiers is the capital of Algeria. Algeria is an extremely large African country that has over 33 million souls living in it. It's right underneath France and Portugal. It's in northern Africa. It's a North African country. It supplies large amounts of natural gas to Europe, and energy exports are the backbone of the Algerian nation. Their economy, according to OPEC, Algeria has the 16th largest oil reserves in the world, and the 2nd largest in Africa, while it has the 9th largest reserves of natural gas. Sonatrach, the national oil company, is the largest company in Africa. Algeria has one of the largest militaries in Africa and the largest defense budget on the continent. Most of Algeria's weapons are imported from Russia, with whom they are a close ally. Algeria is a member of the African Union, the Arab League, OPEC, the United Nations, and is the founding member of Maghreb Union. In 1970, the last liberal president that we had, Nixon, signed an extension of the Voter Rights Act of 1965, making it more liberal, lowering the voting age in the U.S. to be 18 years old. It was influenced by the draft of males who they could fight and die in a country at 18 years of age, but they weren't allowed to vote until they were 21. So, inspired by the draft, Senator Ted Kennedy convinced Congress to add a provision to the Civil Rights, the re-upping of the Civil Rights Act, to add a provision guaranteeing citizens at least 18 years of age the right to vote in federal, state, and local elections. Eventually, Nixon was right about this. The provision wasn't constitutional because it was saying in state and local elections. You could do it in federal elections, but the Attorney General had expedited litigation to test its constitutionality, which I think would be that Mitchell guy that eventually goes to jail for a year and a half. Later that year, in 1970, the Supreme Court in Oregon v. Mitchell struck down the part of the provision lowering the voting age in state elections as unconstitutional. The court upheld only the part of the provision that lowered the voting age in federal elections. The decision precipitated the ratification of the 26th Amendment the following year, which lowered the voting age in all elections to 18. So all elections, now 18-year-olds could go into local, state, and federal elections because of the 26th Amendment, which all came about because on June 22nd, 1970, the extension of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is added by Ted Kennedy, signed by Nixon, started the process to getting that amendment, the 26th Amendment. So now if you're 18, if you're an adult, you can vote in elections. I got 3 more events. Am I going to make it? Yeah, I think I will. Alright, cool. In 1969 in America, oil-sodden floating debris on the Cuyahoga River ignited perhaps by sparks from a passing train. So we already mentioned this, but I didn't put it together, so you're going to hear it again. Burned with flames reported up to 5 stories high. Although firefighters extinguished the blaze in a half hour or so, it caused $50,000 worth of damage. For a century, the Cleveland, Ohio River had been an open sewer for industrial waste through the times when factory production seemed more important than worrying about the environment. Several fires had happened in the prior 100 years, but attitudes changed to outrage. As this time national attention was aroused, it became one of the several disasters that led to the Clean Water Act, and the Environmental Protection Agency determined remedial action for decades since has resulted in cleaner water and improving aquatic life. So you could think, the Cuyahoga River, being set on fire for catching on fire for igniting. The river ignited. And that's why we got the EPA and the Clean Water Act. 1946, jet airplanes were used to transport mail for the first time. 1946, June 22nd, we're using airplanes to transport mail. Now we do it all the time without even thinking about it. For 50 cents, I put something in the mailbox here in Colorado, and then eventually, it'll get to Florida. For 50 fucking cents, or whatever postage is now. But 50 cents, right, it goes into my mailbox, to the local mailbox, to Denver. Denver flies it to some hub around Florida. Then it gets transferred, and then eventually you get your piece of mail. It's amazing. I love the fucking post office. Post office is a good institution. Let's keep the post office. So, June 22nd, 1870, the U.S. Department of Justice is created by the U.S. Congress. The United States Department of Justice, the DOJ, also known as the Justice Department, is a federal executive department of the U.S. government responsible for the enforcement of the law and administration of justice in the U.S., equivalent to the Justice or Interior Ministries of other countries. So the Interior Ministry, they, the top fucking legal, besides the president, right, this would be the strongest motherfucker in the country. Right? The Justice Department, Attorney General, I don't know. Come on, give me a break. It's a federal department. That's sort of true. It's fucking 3:43 in the morning. It's late. The department was formed in 1870 during the Ulysses S. Grant administration. In its early years, the DOJ vigorously prosecuted the KKK. So that's good, right? The DOJ went after the KKK, so fuck the KKK, good for the DOJ. I think the Department of Justice was the ones who did that Ferguson riots, too. They studied it and then I think it's Eric Holder. Who's the Department of Justice now? Department of Justice. I don't know. But one last thing I'll mention, I didn't really put this on the list, but it did happen on June 22nd in 2004. There was this big-ass study in the British Medical Journal by Richard Dahl. He led it. It was a 50-year study of 35,000 British doctors who smoked, and they found that half of persistent cigarette smokers were killed by their habit, and a quarter died before the age of 70. Those who quit by the age of 30 had the same life expectancy as a non-smoker. Even quitting at age 50 saved 6 more years of life over those who continued smoking. At age 80, 65% of non-smokers were still alive, but only 32% of smokers. 50 years before, Dahl published in the same journal the first report of a study that linked cigarette smoking to lung cancer. So, guess what? If you smoke cigarettes, you could get lung cancer. It's obvious. Some of those specifics were interesting. Those who had quit by age 30, if you were smoking, but you quit by 30, then you had the same life expectancy as a non-smoker. So apparently it didn't hurt. It didn't in the long term, because you quit, your lungs were able to regenerate or did whatever it needed to do. And then it says even if it took to the age of 50, you would still save 6 years of your life. So by age 80, 65% of the non-smoking British doctors were still alive, but only 32% of smokers. So 2/3 of the smokers were all dead by 80, but 2/3 of the non-smokers were still alive. So this isn't huge news because obviously cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. But it is actually significant news It's a huge study. It actually is the first study with tobacco, so it took 2004 to actually have an authentic research study that said that, without a doubt, there is a link between smoking cigarettes to, lung cancer. So Richard Dole, his life work is pretty obvious, whatever, but I guess it's a slam dunk, right? 35, and then it's British doctors too. Think of how many British doctors were fucking smoking. In 2004 is when it was published, June 22nd. So those are all the historical and scientific events that I found to be significant, worthy of a holiday to celebrate. This comes from the holidays of the Revolutionary Humanist, and it's also my mother's birthday. So hopefully this day becomes more special, more ingrained. There's plenty of reasons to celebrate June 22nd, so if June 22nd becomes a holiday on its own auspices, then good for me, because I just made the day that my mother just so happened to be born on into a national day of celebrating the neurotransmitters of rats and moving prosthetic arms, or how Obama tried to pull back the troops, 33,000 troops. It was going to take him a year to pull 33,000 troops out. So he tried, but then he found other conflicts to get into, which is what's going to happen to every fucking president, even Bernie Sanders, who voted for the war in Somalia, the war in Kosovo. He's funded every single Iraq and Israeli occupation funding bill since he's been in there, since 1991. So to think that Bernie Sanders, I would think that he would be less imperialist, but he'd be imperialist nonetheless. And that's no good. That's no good. If he gets in there, I would trust him more than anybody else to end the war, but he may find something that he needs to get into too. And what the fuck, What the fuck. Jill Stein, forever. Viva la Revolution. Peace out.